Are you ready to perform at your highest potential? Welcome to the Performance Matters podcast from GP Strategies, your talent transformation partner. In each episode, we'll interview industry experts and explore best practices and innovative insights to help your organization improve performance. The second way to utilize AI to solve problems using the patented Sanchita Sur method is recommend. All right. So talk to us a little bit about recommend from your perspective. How is AI powering that, Sanchita?
So as Matt already covered the, insight recommendation, content action, and people recommendation, but it's important to understand what goes behind a recommendation engine. There are three components: you diagnose, you predict, and you prescribe. So it's very important to first get the data points to diagnose. It's garbage in, garbage out. So it's very important that any recommendation algorithm is running on highly scrubbed and clean data, and therefore, whether it is sales transactions, it is conversations, or it is feedback, all of them are coming together in the context and it's highly, highly accurate. So, which is why that is where AI can also play a part to go clean the data to ensure that you're not getting recommendations that are out of context and not accurate. Because once you get pinged with, not so relevant information, people start turning off. So that's very important. So the other part of recommendation engines at this point of time is people are not really looking for a recommendation of just training. They are looking for recommendations of actions. Earlier, they were usually coded applications that would spew out actions. It's a lookup table, but now no more. So through generative AI, we are able to come up with actions. And I'm going to give you a quick example to build on Matt's topic of performance
Right.
reviews. If I go ahead and ask a bunch of people, can you give me some feedback, that you can actually get the chatbot to go ahead and find people who you're working with automatically and go ahead and say, hey, do you have time to give feedback to Sanchita? And when the feedback comes in, there's a bunch of feedback that I have to go through. Not only have to go through them, I have to assimilate them, convert them into actions, and then ensure that I have some action items on my card and I follow through. AI can really make this really simple. And now we are going to a little bit of rendering or generative AI here, where generative AI can summarize all the feedback, extract the salient skills that I need to improve, rate my skills against my peers who are getting similar feedback, and say, here is an action item, improve the skill, and here is some training recommendation and people who can help you. So this whole heavy lifting, just because it was work, people were not doing the work. So even if it is 90% accurate, because they are all probabilistic models, even if it's 90% accurate, it's still a start. And then, as Matt said, the notifications to keep reminding you to act is also very important.
And I will say this, that in from looking at your website, that hits home where you indicate on your homepage, it says 70% of digital transformations fail. And I think that's what you're talking about, right? Is when you still have all that heavy lifting, you can have a new HR system and have all this, but the fact is you have somebody who's very busy, and then you're asking them to do this other lift of a lot of scrubbing and a lot of thinking and a lot of quadrant two time, to use the old Stephen Covey element, is it unfortunately starts to fall by the wayside. But you can bring in some recommendation AI to do that, and then bring up elements that I think aligned right there with Matt. So I mean, this is where the light bulbs, I think, start going off for people for sure on that side. And now, one thing you had also mentioned there is that concept of garbage in and garbage out, is that you have to have good data on that side. And the other thing I want to ask, and I'm going to ask this to both of you, actually, I'll ask this to our traffic copier, to Matt on this one, is when it comes to feeding data in, I know that's been one of the areas we've had some conversations on, is just some cautionary tales on that. So what, Matt, do individuals and enterprises need to be thinking about before they start thinking about training AI? Like, what needs to be in place from a protection and data security standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's two elements. One is, and oddly enough, there's two sides. This first one is that we need to look beyond the black box. I know that people want to look at AI as this automagic solution that's going to fix everything beginning to end. It's just going to take over and it's going to do what I expect it to be able to do. And there's a lot of trust and faith in that. So when it comes to being able that we expose it to the data that we have, the personal information that we have to understand more about how it can be used, how it's generating the outputs based off the data we give it, how it's being protected, where it's being stored, who has access to it. And that's the hard part, is that because most of the, if you look at the neural nets or the LLMs on the back end, they're the big black boxes that are on the other side. One of the things I've been trying to drive more advocacy for is that it's on the providers of these engines, that they're actually providing us more insights. Where did you get that information? It's never going to be clear and transparent. There's a lot that happens behind the scenes, but help us know where you got things. I mean, the simplest example that we may see is if you look out at Bing. If you put something in versus ChatGPT, if you put it in, it'll actually come back with referential sources of here's where I pulled it, and it'll pop out a mark. It's a starting point to say, I've generatively created something for you, and here's where I got it from. So being able to map that data is it. So we have to get beyond the assumption that one of them is that it's always doing it as we would expect it or anticipate it to. So we need to be able to map back to it. Don't just trust it on one side. But the other one is that if you think of the LLMs or these tools as engines, fuel is the data that fires that engine. And if you have bad fuel, you're going to have the tool will never be able to do what it needs to. And this is, a lot of folks who say, well, just go create a big data lake, dump a bunch of data in it, point the machine at it, and it's going to just do this. And that's not the reality. The humans need to be there to be able to help structure the data, make some sense of it. It can work with unstructured data, but not what we're trying to do. In order to get good, very pointed applications to it, we need to have good, clean data on the back end. And I think that's really where a lot of folks are going to come into some interesting realizations about the quality of their data. Most organizations, I don't think, realize the condition that some of their data is inside the organization.
Probably looks like my daughter's bedroom, probably.
Well, you do a little search inside your company and everybody complains that their company's search is horrible. And it comes back with, I'm trying to find the SOPs from this year, and it brings back everything from 1974 because it's out there. And it's like, then I got to go through because it didn't match it exactly. That's just a bad example of what could happen if you don't help set up the rules. And I love, Sanchita, you talked a lot about setting up the constitutionality, setting guidelines to help sort and make sense of it, because you're not going to be able to truly structure everything, but you make it easier and you give it better guidances on how to make discriminations in the data. So long answer to that, but I think the two things are check our myth that it's an automatic solution. Don't make assumptions that you just point a bunch of data and it's good to go.
Oh, okay. And then one thing, Sanchita, I get the, I guess I'd say the luxury of asking dumb questions since I'm the host here. And one of the questions I guess I would have more from the layperson is how do I, for example, putting data into something like mPlay versus the open ocean chat GTP that you can go to, like, what's the difference of how do I know when it's safe to feed enterprise data into something? It's like, to quote Zoolander, how do I get the files in the computer? How do I know it's safe? So talk a little bit about that, because I think that's a big question out there for people.
Sure. So let me just take security, privacy, and accuracy all together in the generative AI world. Whether it is ChatGPT, GPT in general, or it is Claude and all of those massive large language models, they are all API driven. So, which means content will be processed, it'll go out to an open API, but at the same time, it'll also take in the context data. Who's asking this question? and what kind of metadata is associated with that person, with that question, with question history and context, etc. Because these models have great memory and they're able to store memory and context, really well.
Okay.
So people do have two options. You can go into Azure, Google APIs, even Bedrock, AWS, Bedrock, etc. But make sure that you have those contracts that say 0-day retention, completely private. You're not going to use the data for your training, etc. But it is anyone's guess. The really large companies get sued all the time, but they can pay their way off. But we don't know this animal yet. For people who are extremely sensitive, they're taking one step forward and two steps back and not being able to decide, they're just deliberating. You also have commercially downloadable model options available, like Llama
Okay.
2 and 70B and Falcon, etc., which you can deploy behind your firewall. Your data, your context data, everything is safe. There's no API connection outside. The only thing is they are GPU hungry, which means you have to figure out how to, spend on GPUs. But then there are optimization models that we use all the time to ensure that either your token count in the open world or your GPU consumption in the closed world is optimized. So that's the first thing. So people have options. So people who are sitting on the fence and deliberating, it's better to do than deliberate, and you have those private model options too. The second is all of these models, as Matt mentioned, you need to have those knowledge maps. Whatever I'm getting, where is the source of truth? So to have those
Okay.
reference points, to be able to go back to the original document, and actually we can actually take you to even the page and the paragraph and the segment, but you are able to get a reference of truth so that you know where it is coming from. The third most important thing is any large language model that has prompts, that you can prompt, is open to injection attacks, which means, as you know, one of the Stanford University students, they went ahead and prompted Bing model in a way that Bing was able to give out that my code name is Sydney, and these are the constitution models or ethical AI models that are there. So you can, trick a model to following the instructions because they're all instruct GPT based models. So they can follow instructions. And so it is also important for companies who are exposing these models to the outside organization, customer organization. They should only be allowed to query and let someone in between sit and prompt rather than the customers directly trying to prompt. So that is going to be really important that you're able to safeguard yourself against these SQL injection attacks. And then finally, as Matt mentioned, it is not just important to teach the model what to do, but also what not to do. Have those constitution models that will prevent any offensive information coming out or any kind of restricted information, price information, people information, address. Because and what we also realized when we were implementing some of these models is they have great internal memory. So even if you have not fed it with your enterprise content, it remembers what it has been trained on in the larger internet. So while you are, say, a retail company selling shoes, you can say, "Who's the CEO of Microsoft?" and it'll answer. But it's not supposed to answer in your organization. So we had to stop and instruct that do not respond with your internal memory and restrict all kinds of PII data to come out.
Wow.
So that is
There,
also possible.
there's there's a lot to this. That's for sure. But either way, what you're saying is, if instead of sitting and waiting, you've got options, right? You can have private enterprise ones, or you can have more of the open ocean ones, but have metadata restrictions on it and things like that. And I think you're kind of actually answering some questions that we'll have after this conversation, which is there's still a lot of human involvement in this, right? It's not well, everyone get good at making sandwiches, right? There's a lot of professional work to be done in this world. So for me, that's reassuring. The Performance Matters podcast is brought to you by GP Strategies.
Together, we can create a world where business excellence makes possibilities achievable. You can subscribe to the show anywhere you get podcasts or listen on our website at gpstrategies.com.